Okay, perfect. Recording has started, and welcome everyone. Um, Thank you for joining us today for this introduction to IMM and Iris Plus for the Southeast Asia region. I'm Grace Earle. I am from the GIN. I think a couple of my colleagues on the line, including Kellen Dorio, who I see joining us today. I'm also really excited to be joined by Maud Savory Mornay, our Senior Advisor for Southeast Asia at the GIN, and Kevin Teo from AVPN, from the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. Really excited to be joined by both of you today, and we're looking forward to speaking with everyone here on the line. We'll give a brief overview of the GIN today, then we'll dive into impact measurement and management and IRIS Plus and how that can help investors and you with your impact practice. First, a few quick housekeeping notes. So the session will be recorded, as I noted. We already started the recording. That's for your future reference or for folks who perhaps weren't able to join today. Also, I think everyone was automatically muted when you joined, but if you don't mind staying muted, that would be great, just to preserve the audio quality for the recording. And also, please jump into the chat box and ask questions throughout the webinar. Would love to hear from you, and we'll have about 15-20 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A. So please pop in any questions there. We'll be tracking them and sort of collecting them and asking the questions at the end. And to that end, I know I asked folks if they wanted to put in their organization in their names, but if you'd also like to maybe start using the chat right now and put in your name and organization and where you are in the world right now, that would be great to see who's on the line. Okay, and with that, just a quick overview of the agenda today. We'll do a quick GIN overview, and we have Kevin here, who's also going to give a quick overview of the partnership we have with AVPN in the region. Then we'll move on to the state of impact investing, the state of impact investing market, including a Southeast Asia overview. Then we'll dive into introduction to impact measurement and management, introduction to IRIS Plus, and a Q&A session at the end. So again, encouraging folks to put their questions into the chat box as we move along today. Okay, so an introduction to the GIN. The GIN is the global champion for impact investing. Our organization is dedicated to increasing the scale and effectiveness of impact investing around the world. And we do this by building a community of practice among over 300 plus investor stakeholders across nearly 50 countries. The GIN also provides tools, guidance, resources to help impact investors identify metrics and integrate impact considerations into investment management. And finally, we publish research that enables investors to make more informed decisions related to impact investing. So our vision really is a world in which financial markets serve all members of society, and where finance plays a central role in solving the social and environmental challenges facing the global community in the world today. And in this future, we imagine investors integrate impact considerations into all decisions, and thus building strong, healthy communities and a sustainable future for all. And before we get into the rest of the presentation and a bit more into the state of the market, IMM and IRIS Plus, I would love to hand it over to Kevin of AVPN to say a few words about our partnership and himself.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much, Grace. Yeah, I won't say so much about myself, but I want to highlight the strong partnership between GIN and AVPN, which started, I'd say, 2.5 years ago, when we collaborated on an initial report that was framed around the GIN roadmap. And one of the key points I'd like to emphasize here is around alignment. AVPN does not have its own definition of impact investing. We align entirely to GIN's core principles, and that's what we feel is important in this space. When we talk about metrics and direction and strategy, it is important to sort of communicate to the sector that it is a global effort and it is an aligned effort. And the topic today around impact management is one such key topic. where Grace has mentioned this part about how do you come up with the right indicators and metrics, and all of us as investors understand that this is a key component to communicating our impact in a way that is clear and consistent with the audience that we're addressing. So not having diversity of approaches or frameworks, but moving towards some form of alignment. And on the alignment front, I think Grace will probably expand on this subsequently with regards to how it connects with the Impact Management Project, IMP. We're also strategically partnered with IMP, and likewise, Jin is doing the same with Iris Plus. So this whole notion of moving together in a concerted direction is something that we believe strongly in at ABPN, and working closely with partners like Jin and others in the field is one key component to that. The other sort of key message I wanted to share with everyone is around representation. So we've worked with Grace's colleague Lisa on a couple of Iris Plus stakeholder engagement processes, firstly on climate change mitigation, and most recently on sustainable agriculture. And what I feel is really relevant here is these metrics sort of go through an engagement process with different stakeholders. I think the realization initially was that the Asian voice was not quite present or evident within the earlier kind of metrics frameworks. And that's why the conversation with Lisa around subsequent engagement came about, and then we did these workshops. So to all of you here, I think it's important to bring that Asian voice and component into the deliberation process, because eventually the drafts become part of the standard, and the standard is what becomes publicly available. And then that's sort of the benchmark that we hope the industry is converging around. So encourage everyone to be actively involved in that. I mean, if you don't already sort of have familiarity with what's in the sort of different Iris Plus themes, please take a look. Go with questions to Grace or Maud or even myself. We're happy to talk about all this. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share, Grace. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And that is a great pitch for getting involved with the Jin and Iris Plus, and we'll show a bit more about where you can get involved and how to contact us and all of that at the end as well. But I will now flip it over to Maud to talk a bit about what is impact investing and more about the state of the market. So Maud, over to you.
Thank you so much, Grace, and for inviting me today. And thank you, Kevin, for being such a wonderful host. And really glad we do it in partnership. So I just say a few words on my experience as practitioner of impact investor. And also I'm the representative of the GIN in Southeast Asia. And really today what we would like to do is to give you a better understanding of impact investment. So really introducing to a couple of key concepts. I think Kevin said it, right? There is a language around impact. So it's important we are all aligned around this key concept and element of language. And of course, I leave the floor to Grace for an introduction to impact measurement. And maybe as a background, my background in impact started 12 years ago. I worked for a large asset manager, growing team, growing portfolio in private debt in Asia Pacific, in financial inclusion and climate finance. And so, of course, I have traveled in many of these countries, probably done more than 100 due diligence. And each time you see the same in poor and rural communities, right? Less access to financial inclusion, less access to fertilizer for your crops, less access to quality education, to employment, and all that particularly true in the times of COVID and climate change. So it's a tragedy, but there is tragedy in poverty, but it also creates economic opportunities, particularly when companies are able to provide access to basic services to low-income population. And I think for us, impact investor in Asia, that's really the basis of impact investment in Asia Pacific, and think how it applies today to microfinance, fintech in financial inclusion, climate finance, health and education. And on impact measurement, as I started before the term impact investment was actually coined, I also starting at a point where no such thing as metrics, Iris Plus was existing. So everyone was basically devising its own impact measurement on an Excel sheet. We have gone a long way, right? And I'm really proud today to see the wonderful work done by the Jean, done by Grace and her team, but also done by like-minded organizations such as AVPN to actually align, share the same language, and eventually, and we will discuss it a bit later, move the industry towards more comparison and more benchmarks. On that note, let's go back to what is impact investing. I think Grace said it. We aspire to a world in which social and environmental factors are integrated routinely in all investment decisions, and that would become the normal way of doing things. Of course, today's industry is still very fragmented. There may be confusion, blurred line between different terms, responsible investment, ESG, impact investing. It's a bit of an alphabet soup. But I think the key feature around impact investment is that there is an intention. And it's really about intention to generate positive, measurable, social and or environmental impact. And I think that's really, really the key message. Investors at the end of the day wants to know how the capital is making an impact. And of course, it's expressed in terms of financial returns, but it's also in terms of impact on people and the planet. And with this intention, of course, we need to add a need to be measured, demonstrated so that it's authentic and there is integrity. And in doing that, we avoid what is called impact washing, greenwashing, and we will discuss it again later. As you know, impact investment can be done in emerging markets, but also in developed markets. It can be made across asset classes, and today, particularly in Asia, we see all asset classes basically used to do impact investment, ranging from private debt to private equity, venture, listed, etc. So a variety of choice from an investment and investor perspective. And investor also target a range of financial returns. And that's also one of the key message today. Next slide, yes. And I just like to emphasize again a couple of key messages. It's impact investing is somehow different from philanthropy, right? It's different from philanthropy. And I keep saying that because particularly in Asia, philanthropy plays a very important role, and Kevin from AVPN won't say differently, right? But sometimes there is a bit of a confusion and a lack of understanding of the spectrum of capital, moving from philanthropy to impact investing. So impact investing, it's investment. Let's be all aligned on that. Impact investing doesn't mean you have to trade financial return and impact. And actually, in our annual survey, the Jean did an annual survey back in 2020. It was very clear that most of investors, actually 7 out of 10 investors, so it's a lot, the majority of investors are looking for market risk adjusted return. So it's a very important message, market risk adjusted return. And finally, something that also is part of one of the misconceptions, it's not only about small investment. And don't take me wrong, small investment can be really great and have a huge impact, but impact investing can also imply a large amount, being in private debt or in private equity and in the listed space. And when I say large, today, asset managers in the space of impact investing in private debt do routinely tickets up to 25 million USD ticket size. Next slide, please. Yes, so that's the key data, 715 billion USD. That's what today the size of the market is about, which is actually quite significant for a market that has over a decade of existence, is still growing very fast. And if you think about it, it's actually a very significant supply of capital that has the capacity to address some of the most pressing problems in Asia and elsewhere. So let's look now how investments are deployed over the world. it takes place everywhere. I guess it's a key message, right? In all regions, with a big half of it, actually 60%, allocated to emerging markets, and the rest being allocated to more developed economies. And today, when we look at the size of Asia Pacific, it's roughly 19%. If you drill down to Southeast Asia and East Asia, it's 8%, which for a very populated and very dynamic region, I guess demonstrates that there is still a lot of room for growth in this space. Next slide, please. Yes, so I said it already, variety of options, both from an investment and from an investor perspective. I guess when I started in Impact, it was mostly about private debt in the microfinance space. Today, it touches to a variety of asset classes. Private debt, still a big chunk of it, private equity, public equity, real assets, and we see also a very strong development of new and innovative solution involving blended finance. And on that, and because we talked about partnership, please have a look to the report done by Convergence, which is also one of our partners, on the state of blended finance in Asia. So where does this capital go? Financial services and microfinance still a big part of it, with today, as we know, a lot of fintechs involved in the space of financial inclusion. Energy, clean energy, being another important sector today, with a variety of sectors. It ranges from distributed energy to energy efficiency, to solutions involving more natural conservation, and an interesting 9% dedicated to food and agriculture, and something we see growing a lot, right? Strengthening the sustainable agriculture chain, but also looking at topics such as biodiversity or managing forest, for example. Next. So I said it, now you must believe me, investors look at market rate adjusted return, actually 7 out of 10, according to the GN Impact annual survey. And you may wonder, okay, what sort of return are we looking at? The survey gives actually more detail, but you should think of single digit in the private debt space and double digit in the private equity space, in range with what more traditional fund would offer. So here we are in Southeast Asia. As I said, still some room to grow, right? But we have all the conditions today to grow the market and a strong community. And definitely when we look at the growth of different markets, it's one of the fast growing regions, which gives a lot of actually, I mean, a lot of hope for the future growth. Just a word on what we do at the GN in Asia. We have a couple of events. You are welcome to join, obviously. We organize networking event, what I call network with a purpose. Network organized around topics such as climate, food, health, gender. We do also organize product structure workshop, which are designed for asset manager, which are in the later stage of introducing funds or products. We have Knowledge Hub, which are intended to be a platform to exchange information between our members. We have two platforms currently, which are on blended finance and gender lens investing. And there are also, of course, a lot of other opportunities to join, particularly on webinars around IRIS+. Okay, and today we see a diversity of investors, right? And I think that's a key important feature. Fund manager, obviously, providing solutions, development finance institution, but also more and more diversified financial institution and banks, foundation, family offices, a fast-moving segment in our sectors. And also faith-based investors are quite important. And it's not really for name dropping that we are showing it, but just to illustrate, right, that today we see a variety of institutions ranging from foundations to family offices, and you may recognize a couple of names based in the region in Singapore and Hong Kong and Australia. And on that note, I hand over to Grace for the core of our presentation on impact measurement.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Maud, for that introduction to the market. And I will go, we'll start right in on impact measurement and management. So first we'll level set a bit and say what we mean by impact measurement and management, or IMM. So impact measurement and management includes identifying and considering the positive and negative effects that investments have on people and the planet, and then figuring out ways to mitigate the negative and maximize the positive, all in alignment with your impact goals. And when investors get started with IMM, these are a few questions that they may ask themselves, and we'll walk through these briefly. First, why measure my impact? And you'll see a few charts here in this section, and they are from a GIN report. We've released our second edition in January 2020 of the State of Impact Measurement and Management Practice. So the information you'll see here is pulled from that report. And here you see several reasons cited by investors for having an impact measurement and management practice. This first kind of group here represents the need to drive impact naturally. And more specifically, to understand progress towards goals, report on impact, and improve impact performance. Investors also cited that having an impact measurement and management practice actually helps them drive investee performance. So for example, impact data may help segment customers more efficiently or develop effective marketing, thus driving revenue and growth for their investees. And another large group here is to drive client interest. And what we mean by this is, being able to earn trust with stakeholders that are asking for this impact information, perhaps funders or other stakeholders who are looking for impact data about the investment. And what do I measure? Most investors, per the survey, evaluate both outputs and outcomes. Those are the most common dimensions, and you'll see some others across the survey as well, including incorporating stakeholder experience into evaluating impact and what they're measuring. Also, investors set targets at a variety of levels. So most often you'll see at the investment level, at the deal level, but over half of investors setting targets at the fund level and 43% at the sector or thematic level. So investors set impact targets using evidence and various stakeholder input, and you can see how targets are set here in this survey. So most commonly, investors start with big problems they hope to address and then set targets from there. Or what is often used are global development agendas, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are a few others listed here, but those are the two that are most often cited as how investors set their impact targets. We'll review briefly a few notes investors can think about when setting up your IMM practice. So here is really the core of what IMM is. This is the four main steps in how to set up an IMM practice, if you will. The first one being setting goals and designing investment strategies based on the investment or based on the problem you're trying to address. And investors really should always consider the pathway that will get them to that impact goal and produce the best results of achieving those goals. Next, of course, and we'll get into Iris Plus and how this can help you with step number 2, but select metrics and set targets. So impact metrics should ultimately help with investment decision information, including when to pivot when necessary. When you use clear standardized metrics, this will allow you to have a consistent and comparable way to look at your impact data across your portfolio and across different investments. Next, of course, is to take the metrics and targets and actually measure the results. So once impact targets are set, it's important to plan on how data will be collected and stored and analyzed. Lastly, and you'll see it's not just 1 through 4, it's a continuous circle. You're always learning, adjusting, and improving based on this impact data. Any impact data really should be, as I said, helpful in making decisions and pivoting when necessary. So embedding feedback loops throughout the life cycle of an investment and incorporating feedback from affected stakeholders is key, and then making changes from there. Next, I'll note that investors cited using impact data throughout the full investment process. So most commonly, impact data is used during due diligence, as you can see here, designing an investment or portfolio strategy, and identifying the social or environmental needs to address through the investment. And we will get into Iris Plus after this because it's a tool that investors use often to measure their impact. Another cited tool or framework used to measure impact are the UN SDGs. And you'll see a few others listed here, but we'll dive into Iris Plus and the Iris catalog of metrics here and show how it can help you with your IMM practice. Okay, so an introduction to Iris Plus. So Iris Plus is the generally accepted system to measure, manage, and optimize your impact, helping investors translate impact goals into real results. Iris Plus was created in collaboration with over 1,600 stakeholders at this point. It's managed by the GIN, but is an industry-wide effort. And it builds on over a decade of the Iris catalog of metrics. And you'll see a few key features listed here, including core metric sets, short lists of key indicators which help investors measure progress towards impact goals, an evidence base which helps to inform an investment's theory of change and help anticipate expected impact. There are also several practical guidance resources that are within Iris Plus, and we'll show a bit of that in a minute here, that are all available to help investors with their IMM practice, including key topics such as impact due diligence, incorporating stakeholder voice into your impact measurement and management practice, and how to collect data and data collection tools. I'll also note, and Kevin mentioned a little bit earlier, that we are aligned with over 50 industry frameworks and other standards. And this is really to lessen the burden of reporting on investors and to align with other standards in the industry. And Iris Plus is, of course, a public good. So if you haven't already, I strongly suggest creating a login. It's very easy, but open to the public, and all of you are able to go in and use all the resources in there. These are just a few folks and organizations and initiatives that were involved in the creation of Iris Plus, just to show the wide array and breadth of folks who have helped us build this system. So from investors to networks, data providers, and initiatives, many partners have helped us build Iris Plus. And Iris Plus was designed to solve 3 key needs as expressed by investors. So first, investors cite the need for consistent agreement on and implementation of norms and principles. And Iris Plus helps show investors how to adhere to those principles and use IMM norms and conventions. Next, clear and comparable data is needed. I touched on this a bit, but Iris Plus helps pave the way towards benchmarking, for example, and data consistency and comparability with the core metric sets. Additionally, investors need best-in-class resources to help set up and improve their IMM practice. And Iris Plus does just that. It surfaces the best-in-class resources to help investors based on their themes targeted and goals. Additionally, since Iris Plus launched in May of 2019, there's been quite a great uptick in users and been quite wide adoption across the world. As of December 2020, you can see the stats here. There are over 14,000 unique users representing over 8,500 unique organizations across the world, and also representing various stakeholder types. So lots of different stakeholder voices are using Iris Plus today. And before we take a look inside Iris Plus, this is a quick overview of the content development pipeline. So we have several themes already in Iris Plus for your use right now, from energy access to quality healthcare to sustainable forestry. Right now, we have several themes in development as well, including quality jobs and climate change mitigation. And Kevin was alluding to this a bit before too, but we have many in the pipeline that are currently being developed. Racial equity, clean energy, and biodiversity are the next themes that are up for development. So if any folks on the line are interested in joining those expert stakeholder calls and contributing to the development of those themes, we would love to have you involved. But this gives you a sense of the breadth of themes that are available currently in Iris Plus. So what we'll do now is take a look inside Iris Plus and explain a bit more what is available for you to use as you think about setting up or optimizing or improving your IMM practice. And I'll just give one more kind of plug to pop in any questions you have as we go through this quick overview of Iris Plus. So I mentioned earlier that it takes a few minutes to set up an account, so I would recommend doing so. This is the page you'll see before you either create an account or log in. And on this screen as well, or on this page, you'll be able to click into the menu and see various Iris Plus resources and a bit more about the actual system before creating an account or logging into your account. But once you do have an account, you will log in, and once we'll review how to create an impact profile and what exists in those impact profiles. But your homepage here is where you will see those profiles once you do set them up. So for example, you may have a clean energy portfolio and a housing portfolio, and you'd like to create impact profiles for each one. They would both appear here on this screen. Okay, so getting into how you actually create an impact profile. To set up a profile, the Iris Plus system will ask just a few simple questions so it can surface relevant metrics and resources related to your impact goals. The first being which SDGs align with your impact priorities or impact category align, or which impact categories align, category aligns with your impact priorities. And either way, whether you choose SDGs or impact priority to start this funnel, you'll get to the same information. So this is what the impact categories would look like, and you choose the one that's most relevant. But either way, you'll get to the same information. So you choose your SDG or impact category, and then the next question the system will ask you is to narrow down a bit more into what impact theme aligns with your impact priorities. And lastly, you will choose which strategic goal or goals best match your investment approach under that theme. And that is it. At this point, all the inputs for your profile are complete, and the system will surface the relevant information based on those inputs. So here's what an impact profile will look like or looks like. And the first tab on the impact profile provides a high-level summary on the investments within this theme and strategic goal. The other thing you'll see right away is the alignment to the SDGs that it's most directly linked to and additionally linked to. So here, investors often say this saves them time in terms of aligning with the SDGs, or perhaps if you already have an alignment with the SDGs, this may validate that alignment for you. And the next tab is an overview tab. And here is where the system surfaces information, research, stats, answers to key questions around your chosen strategic goal. And they're all framed within the IMP's 5 dimensions of impact. And we do this to contextualize the information and make sure to surface all of the relevant key stats and questions around the chosen strategic goal. So for example, you'll see the current scale of the problem, who is most impacted by the problems, what risk factors are associated with this problem that you're trying to solve through your investments. And again, we've heard from investors that this is perhaps helpful during due diligence as you think through how to align your investments with your goals, or perhaps to help when you're investing in new themes that you haven't invested in before. There's kind of a one-stop shop for information related to that strategic goal. And we will get into the evidence base next. So the next tab here is a built-in evidence base. And here what you can do is select outcomes related to the chosen strategic goal and see a list of relevant evidence about that outcome. So, and they're all categorized by rigor of study according to the NESTA standards of evidence. And here, this can help you really easily find impact evidence related to the impact goals, and hopefully helps you cut down on time spent looking for this type of evidence. And investors have cited that this helps with perhaps coming up with helping with create a theory of change or communicate this long-term impact and outcome of your investment to funders or other stakeholders. And yeah, that's how folks have used the evidence base. And next are the core metric sets, which I've started to reference a few times here already. And these are short lists of key metrics related to your chosen strategic goal. And essentially, this helps you not have to go through the whole IRIS catalog of metrics. What this will do is surface key metrics and indicators for the chosen strategic goals. And this way, you will be able to measure by using the core metric sets, it helps you measure your impact in a clear, consistent, and comparable way. And you don't necessarily have to use all of the metrics, but the core metric sets are a starting point for what investors and our expert stakeholder groups have decided are the best or the most relevant metrics for this strategic goal. And within the core metric sets, which are also arranged by the IMP's 5 dimensions of impact to contextualize the information and to make sure all dimensions of impact are being tracked. Within the core metric sets, you'll be able to click open and see drop downs on more information, including guidance on how to calculate the indicator, which metrics are needed for this indicator, exactly how to calculate against that, and other key considerations for these indicators, all within one clear drop down. Additionally, if you click on any single metric, this will pop open and give you a bit more information about that metric specifically. And I'll first note that there's a how section in the core metric sets as well. So this is in addition to the IMP's 5 dimensions. And we added this as investors wanted a way to track exactly how they're making the intended impact happen. So through processes or number of employees reached, for example, really how is this impact happening? Those are the types of metrics and key indicators that will show up here. And the next thing to note here is that while standardization is key for comparability, and that's why a big reason why the core metric sets exist, but we understand that there are metrics that are unique to your investments. So the IRIS Plus core metric sets also allow for you to customize your core metric set by adding existing IRIS metrics that are specific to your goals. So if anything is needed for different contexts or for your goals specifically, you're able to add them into your core metric sets and have them all in one place. Additionally, there is a built-in guidance tab that offers practical how-to resources for how to improve your IMM practice. So for example, how IRIS Plus can help with due diligence, or how IRIS Plus helps with incorporating stakeholder voice into your investment decisions. You'll also see here, and what's shown on the screen here, also what we call IRIS Plus fundamentals, and a bit more information about the rules and concepts underpinning the IRIS Plus system. So this includes, for example, we've mentioned the 5 dimensions of impact and the overview and core metrics tabs being arranged by the 5 dimensions. If you'd like to dig in a bit more to that alignment and how that works throughout the whole IRIS Plus system, we have a guidance piece here for you to use, or for you to reference. IRIS Plus also provides a curated list of third-party resources. So these are vetted, third-party, best-in-class resources that are relevant to your profile and goals. Again, all in one place for you to use. Lastly, all core metric sets can be downloaded in Excel format. So this makes them very easily shareable with any stakeholders, such as investees or others who you may want to align with in terms of the metrics you're using and the core metric sets you're referring to in IRIS Plus. And that is a very brief, but hits on all the main points of what is included in IRIS Plus and in an impact profile. And again, once you create your impact profiles, they will all appear here on your homepage for you to use. And we wanted to highlight just a few, and I'm just keeping an eye on time. I just have a couple more slides here, and then we'll get into questions. But I highlight a few ways that, a few things that stakeholders are saying about IRIS Plus. So users have cited that IRIS Plus helps them align to other industry standards and frameworks. So we've talked about this alignment a bit. The SDGs is an example of an alignment where all of IRIS Plus is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. IRIS Plus also helps cut down on time spent setting up IMM practice, and folks have reiterated that to us. Investors have also said that this helps them measure what matters. So shifting from outputs to outcomes and getting closer and closer to that impact. Lastly, communicating with stakeholders, including funders, looking for specific impact information is another way investors have cited they use IRIS Plus. And calling out one use case here, so we have several that are available. We have a link here. I'll maybe chat a few links after this too. But we have a use case featured here about Leapfrog. And you can see the full use case on our site along with a few others. But the use case highlights how Leapfrog integrates IRIS Plus across the whole investment cycle, from building their theory of change to measurement of impact data. And the use case also highlights how Leapfrog uses IRIS Plus to measure and benchmark performance across their portfolio. So perhaps an interesting use case for folks to reference. Additionally, one of Jin's strategic priorities right now is to help, or in general, one of Jin's strategic priorities is to help scale the industry with integrity. And right now we're thinking about 2 ways that are helping to support this priority. And one is through IRIS Plus, which helps investors have clear and comparable data to be able to compare performance across their portfolio. But a key piece that has been missing until now is understanding how investor impact performs compared to peers, compared to other investors, and compared to the industry. For example, are their investments doing better or worse, or about the same as peers? And to be able to answer that question, the Jin has piloted impact performance studies across 4 verticals. So we have clean energy, agriculture, housing, and financial inclusion at the moment. And what we have done is aggregated impact performance at a sector level to be able to draw insights from the aggregated performance of investors. And based on this work, the GIN has developed a methodology for understanding and comparing impact performance that can drive impact performance analytics, such as benchmarks. So we're not there yet, but this is paving the way for benchmarks, and this is available for folks to use and reference. And I'll go to the next slide, which shows a bit more about the impact performance study. So if you're interested in learning more from seeing the analytics, as well as participating in these studies, so if you have data that you would like to let the GIN use for these studies, that would be amazing. Data collection is ongoing. So these are a few ways that you can get involved or learn more about impact performance. This is also just a bit of a teaser on a report that was just launched recently, Insights on Financial Performance and Financial Decision Making. So this is another link that perhaps I will add into the chat box, but the quick points here that impact investors are approaching performance and capital allocation with increasing sophistication. The financial performance varies significantly based on asset class and diverse objectives. Risk-adjusted market rate returns can be achieved, and impact debt funds are especially important for risk mitigation and diversification. So there's examples within this report on making financial performance decisions as they relate to impact. And with that, I will stop talking and hand it over to everyone on the line for questions. I know now we're down to about 11 minutes, but hopefully we can get to as many as possible.
Thank you so much, Grace, for your great presentation. I think you are all energized by now and all frantically typing your email into Iris Plus if it's not done already. I see we have already a great question from Liana. Liana is actually from Finapster, Ethical Investing for Active Asset Manager. So the question is for you, Grace, and maybe I split it into two parts. The first question is around Iris Plus and whether Iris Plus is already looking at gender, racial equality in the workplace, and if Iris Plus could help in that to that respect. Maybe, Grace, you could say a few words about where Iris Plus is heading to in terms of new sectors and new topics.
Sure. Yes, so I will first mention the existing gender lens theme that we have available in Iris Plus. So I encourage you to check that out. It has a core metric sets and evidence. It has you can create an impact profile for that theme specifically and get information related to a gender lens investing strategy. Racial equity is up next in terms of theme development. So we'll actually be kicking that off very soon, imminently. So again, we'll show links at the end of this, or you can chat or get in touch with us, however makes the most sense. But we would love for folks on the line, if you're interested in being involved in the development of that theme, to please join. And yeah, I'll stop there. That's for racial equity and gender. We have a few others coming up that I mentioned, clean energy and biodiversity. But yeah, those are the themes upcoming.
And thank you, Grace. And there is a second question also from Liana regarding what sort of comparison one can use. And a very specific question, whether it's possible to use an industry average. And maybe on that note, we could say that there have been some workshops organized, including in Asia already, with the IMM team, mostly focusing on methodology. So answering exactly this kind of question. But Grace, would you like maybe to elaborate a bit on what is available and what is acceptable to be used, right, in terms of benchmarks?
In terms of benchmarks, yes. I mean, so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, good. Sorry.
No, and this is a bit, and I'll just pop back to these slides. So this is, so the GIN is the research team specifically is working hard to has been working hard to do this work. And this is a bit what I talked about here with the impact performance study. So we're working to aggregate data at the investment level by sector and start to give some of that performance data so you can actually make comparisons. I mentioned the four sectors we have available right now, and that's financial inclusion, clean energy, housing, and agriculture and sustainable agriculture. So I encourage you to check those reports out. We also have, for the most recent studies, interactive dashboards that you can filter by to ensure you're comparing to your peers in terms of geography or asset class, etc. So in terms of information and data to compare to, that is how the GIN is working towards providing that data.
Great. We have another question from Michael. So Michael, you didn't specify which organization you come from, but I suspect you are involved in listed equities given your question. Given that the question is about whether IRIS Plus can be used in the sector of listed equities and how it would translate into an impact measurement report. I mean, maybe on that note, and I can start answering the question and leave it over to you, Grace, but the GIN, of course, recognize that listed equities is an important and growing space in impact investment. And there is currently actually a working group gathering many practitioners in the listed equity space, exactly to look again at how impact investment applies in the context of listed equities. And also to keep the integrity, right, of what impact investment. And again, you are welcome to join the GIN and this working group to drive the sector and contributed to the elaboration of guidelines. So that's for the general answer, but maybe Grace, you want to be more specific on IRIS Plus applying to listed equities.
Yes, so I was going to mention the working group as well. And I'll also, make clear that IRIS Plus is asset class and instrument agnostic, so can be used across all types of investments. And I mean, I'll say investors in both public equity or public markets and private markets have used IRIS Plus, and across the whole cycle. So it depending on where you're hoping to build your IMM practice kind of first, or where you're starting out. IRIS Plus, maybe, for example, we talked about the evidence base being helpful in a theory of change. And then getting down to the actual metrics that you might use to assess performance. But investors, listed equities included, have used IRIS Plus along the full investment cycle. So yeah, IRIS Plus is sector agnostic, but also asset class and instrument agnostic.
Wonderful answer. Thank you, Grace. Another question is related to let's say the articulation. I mean, how the Sustainable Development Goals and IRIS Plus relate to each other. And obviously you have presented some slides showing that Sustainable Development Goal is somehow the overarching framework when it comes to measuring impact, but IRIS Plus and IRIS tools comes next to it. So maybe can you elaborate a bit on how it fits all together, and maybe come back on this process of aligning, right, IRIS Plus with other type of metrics, because I think it's really one of the key features of the tool.
Sure. So first on the SDGs, so the IRIS Plus system and SDGs complement each other quite well. So investors will think about investments in terms of which SDGs they are contributing to, and then IRIS Plus can help you think about, okay, how much did you contribute, or are you actually contributing, or could I be contributing more, by understanding the right metrics to track, or the good set of metrics to track impact. So in that way, again, quite complementary in understanding where you are in reaching your impact within those SDG goals, or within your target SDGs. And then a bit more practically, Iris Plus is aligned to specific SDGs by theme and by strategic goal, such that when you input your information into Iris Plus and surface relevant information in your impact profiles based on themes and goals, all on the back end, Iris Plus has been aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, so you can see that alignment front and center when you do input your impact priorities. And even more granularly, the whole Iris Plus catalog, or the whole Iris catalog, is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is getting a bit, Maud, I think, into the second point here, in that we have aligned Iris metrics and the Iris Plus system to over 50 frameworks. So this means that if you are using a commonly used framework or standard, such as the SDGs or HIPSO or 2X challenge, if you're looking at a gender lens, that we have done the alignment on the back end to make sure that we are synced with that standard or that framework, so that you can easily report. So we have that interoperability between systems, but we do that all kind of on the back end, and then present you with the information that is aligned to those frameworks. So I won't go into more detail than that, but that, I think, Maud, that was the kind of second point that you were hitting on in that question.
Absolutely, and that's very important to remember that, right? I think we have only 2 more minutes, so which means time for one more question, and I will pick one which is a bit of a conclusion for this session. A remark from Akil saying that okay, impact investing does not mean you have to trade financial return for impact, but the narrative is still very prevalent. People still believe you have to sacrifice returns if you create a positive impact. How can we change the story? And maybe that can be the conclusion, right? We have collectively to change the story, right? So the GIN does its work into sharing data, demonstrating that actually investors are looking for market rate returns, that you don't need to trade financial returns, that there is a spectrum as well in terms of financial return one would be looking at when doing impact investment. But I would say it's a collective effort, right? Share your stories around you and take opportunities to be vocal about your experience. And on the second part is the question is what comes next, right? Session on IMM and Iris Plus. We were actually very fortunate to have Grace today. There will be other sessions, and maybe Grace, you would like to say a word on what comes next. And Zarmin, who is on this chat, and myself are based in the region. So if you feel a specific needs to share the GIN vast knowledge resource with your stakeholders, organization, professional association, I mean, you name it, don't feel shy and contact us. We would be more than happy to support you. So Grace, maybe on the scheduling of events?
Yes, so I will just mention briefly, I put up the slide here with some dates and some TBD lines here, but the main point to take away here is that we would love to stay in touch and love to have you join us for these subsequent sessions on Iris Plus. There is one coming up in April that we are figuring out, but it will likely be thematic based. So I hope to pick a theme to sort of dive into. And then in May and November, we're going to do workshops. So these will be much more interactive and deep dives into specific themes. So we hope you'll join us for those and keep in touch. And we're a minute over, but I will just note here, and Maud started to talk about this a little bit too, of just how to get involved with Iris Plus and the GIN. So we do have monthly demos of Iris Plus if you'd like to dig in a little bit more. We actually have 2 coming up tomorrow, so one at the same time tomorrow, if you'd like to join and maybe perhaps have the opportunity to ask questions that you weren't able to on this call. there's guidance, upcoming webinars. If you are a member, you can reach out for consultations, or you can learn more about becoming a member. But these are, and building new themes is another note, just to reiterate here, that if you're interested in getting involved in the building of Iris Plus, we would love to hear from you. And Maud mentioned our regional advisors here. Please reach out to Maud and Zarmeen and Anil. They would be happy to talk about your work in the region, and get you more involved in the gin. Anything else, Maud, that you'd like to add on this front?
Wonderful, that's great, and thank you so much, Grace, for inspiring us, right, with your work and what the gin is doing in measuring impact. I think that's the end of the session, so I really would like to thank again AVPN for being such a wonderful host, and working in partnership with us, to Grace and all of you, and looking forward for next interaction.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Maud, Kevin. Yeah, great to see everyone, and hope you stay in touch.